Hi, in this video, we're going to go ahead and show you how to install our newest WinFree 2.0 product. One of the most important things to do when you receive your equipment is first make sure that every piece of equipment you have is completely compatible. One of the easiest ways to do that is with our Samsung HVAC mobile app. To verify that it's a match and everything's compatible, we'll move over to the Specifications tab. We can then hit the Scan button at the bottom, and we can come down and scan the barcode on one piece of equipment and pull up our submittals to verify that all the equipment we have is completely compatible. The other thing that we want to verify before installing the system is that we have the proper line set with the proper size. And if you purchase the line set from Samsung HVAC, it'll come fully insulated on both lines. It'll also include the 14 gauge power wire that you need and the 16.2 stranded shielded cable that you need for communication. Now that we've verified all of our components are correct, let's get ready to go ahead and install the new WinFree 2.0 indoor unit. Now that we've unboxed the unit, the first step we're going to want to do is remove the packing tape over the wall bracket. Then we'll press down on the tabs in two places, and we can remove the wall bracket, which we're going to use later to mount to the wall. The next thing that you want to do is rotate the unit over a little bit so that we can show you that every indoor unit will come with a QR code that you can quickly scan to register the product once you've completed the installation. The next step to install the wall mount unit is to grab the quick guide for installation. In this quick guide, every step in the installation is covered. The first step that we're going to do is install the wall bracket. Your quick guide will give you all the information that you need for installing the wall bracket, including the dimensions that you might need for drilling the penetration through the wall to run your line set, your power wiring, and your drain line. To make sure that you have the right dimensions on where you're going to drill your hole for your line set bundle, refer to the specific manual and the specific size of the indoor unit that you're installing, as they will differ. Before we install the wall bracket, let's talk about a couple of important dimensions that you need to be aware of. First, right here there's a plus symbol. Now, we've highlighted these in black for the purpose of the video, but you'll see them stamped into the wall bracket when you do the installation. This plus mark is where you're going to make all of your measurements from. Next to it, you'll see the measurements for different models, whether you have model A or model B, that'll explain where you're going to put your mounting holes. The best step is to first put a mounting screw in the center here so that you can hang the plate on the wall to level it. The next set of information that you're going to want to be sure of is which holes you're mounting the back plate in. The key thing you're going to want to know is that you look for these arrows in 1, 2, 3, and 4 locations. That's the minimum spots that you need to place your wall anchors. Should you feel that you need more, you can use extras, but these points will keep the system from bowing or the wall bracket from shifting away from the wall. The first step that we'll do then is drop it on the wall, put our center hole with a screw here and an anchor, put a level on top to level the wall bracket, mark the holes, and install the anchors in the proper location. All right, now let's go ahead and set the indoor unit on the wall bracket. You'll notice we have 1, 2, 3 points here that'll grab onto the top of the wall bracket. Let's rotate the unit over. Now let's remove the packing tape that holds the bottom panel in place. Simply grab the corner of the bottom panel and pull up. And that will give you immediate access to the refrigerant piping, the condensate drain, and the electrical connections. We can move these to the position we need to move them. And note that the copper tubing has an integral spring bender to help us to make sure we don't kink. Here's our drain line, and what we're going to do now is remove the set screw that holds the electrical panel in place, slide the door up so that when we mount it on the wall we can make our electrical connections. And it's a great idea to put the screw back in place so that we don't lose it for when it's time to lock the system back up. Now let's go ahead and mount the unit on the wall bracket. Now the unit snapped into place onto the wall bracket. Now we can go ahead and move our refrigerant piping and start the process to install our refrigerant piping, drain line, and electrical connections. For this application, we're going to run the line set exposed on the wall. But to make it look better, we're going to use a line set cover to hide the refrigerant pipe and the drain line and the wiring. Let's go ahead and install the back of our line set cover now, and then once the refrigerant pipes are made, we can make the connection to hide it by putting the front cover on. Now that we've mounted our line set cover, we're going to go ahead and remove the flare nuts that came with the unit, and we're going to use those when we make our flare to our new line set to make for a good quality connection that'll be leak-free. You'll notice when we remove the flare nuts that the nitrogen charge which is held inside the unit is being released. That's a good sign that your unit is leak-free. So the next step that we want to do after we've made our flare is hold the copper pipe up to the flare nut to verify that the cone's the right size. Then we can manually tighten down the flare nut as tight as we can get it. And once we have the flare nut locked in place, we're going to use our torque wrench to tighten it to the appropriate torque values. Then we're going to refer to the quick installation guide for the specific torque values for each model that you're installing. Note that they will differ based on the line set size. You'll also use your torque wrench and a backup wrench here to tighten them down, and wait until the torque wrench makes the appropriate sound. A click if you're using a manual torque wrench, or an audible tone if you're using a digital torque wrench. Since our drain line is going to be running through our line set cover, we're going to go ahead and use some locally acquired drain line extension hose. We'll simply connect these together, use a hose clamp to tighten it up, and then we can use this tubing to bend through the line set cover to run to our final destination, where we'll connect it up to PVC or whatever our main drain line is. Indoor units on our mini split systems receive 230 volts power from the outdoor unit. Here we're going to run 3 conductors, one for L1, one for L2, and one dedicated ground, through the wire harness here, and then make our final designations on the terminal block on the indoor unit. The communication wire that'll run between the indoor unit and the outdoor unit must be 16-2 stranded with a shield. It's a great idea to use fork terminals or ring terminals so that you get a good, solid connection, because it's very low voltage on these wires, and any interference could drag the voltage down and cause communication errors. It's also recommended or required at the indoor unit that you do not use the shielded cable or ground the shielded cable in any way. It's best that you cut it back and tape it so it's out of the way to prevent any communication errors. Now these 2 wires will be connected to F1 and F2 on the indoor unit, and they'll be connected to F1 and F2 on the outdoor unit. Now that the refrigerant piping, the drain line, and the electrical are connected, let's go ahead and attach our bottom panel. Now that the unit's installed with the bottom panel in place, we can go ahead and remove our protective covering to get the unit ready for operation. Now let's go ahead and open up the outdoor unit. Simply remove the packing straps, then lift the top right off. You'll see the protective plastic that the unit's housed in. We'll also notice that the outdoor unit comes with a bag of accessories, which we will use in our installation. One of the first steps we want to do is install the rubber vibration isolators to the bottom feet of the condensing unit just by sliding them on. Now we'll go ahead and get the base rails prepped so that we can set the unit up on base rails, which will elevate it above the highest anticipated snow level and allow for proper condensate drainage when in defrost. In this installation, we're going to use the adapter that came with the system to allow our condensate to be drained into an area where it won't impede traffic or cause a freeze or a slip hazard. It simply snaps into the bottom, and now we can hook up our drain tube to run it wherever we'd like. Now that we have the unit sitting on the aftermarket base rails that we're going to use to install the system, we simply will take the provided hardware and tighten them down so that the outdoor unit is connected to the mounting feet. To make our electrical connections and our piping connections on the outdoor unit, we first need to remove the access panel. Push down and you can remove the panel. And you can see that now we have access to our service ports for our 2 refrigerant lines. Up here we have a connection for our high voltage on L1 and L2. And over here we have a connection for our communication on F1 and F2. Notice these 2 blocks here are the wire harnesses that are going to hold our high voltage and our low voltage cabling. They're spaced sufficiently apart so that the high voltage wires will not impede with the communication signal of the low voltage wires. And up here in the upper right hand corner of the unit, we're provided with 2 knockouts to make the entrance points for our communication and our power wiring. So now that we've made our electrical connections, we've grounded the high voltage wiring. We've landed our power on L1 and L2. We've ran our control wiring through the separate wiring harness. We've ran that to F1 and F2. And then we've grounded our shielded conductor outside in a separate location. Be sure not to connect your shielded cable ground to your high voltage ground. This will cause a nuisance communication fault. So now that we've made the electrical connections, we've connected our refrigerant piping, and what we're going to use is our torque wrench to set the torque value on those flare nuts appropriately. Now that the flare nuts are torqued, it's time to pressure test the system utilizing dry nitrogen. What we're going to use is a 5/16 Schrader core removal tool, and we're going to remove the Schrader cores so that we can pressure test the system and then have an evacuation, pulling the moisture out. Removing the Schrader cores will allow for a faster evacuation time. Now, according to the quick installation guide that we're provided with the system, Samsung requires a 3-step pressurization process. Pressurize to 200 psi and hold that for 5 minutes. During this 5-minute test period, you can use your soap bubble solution to check for leaks at any and all of the flare connections. The second step of the pressurization is to pressurize the system to 400 psi and hold it for 5 minutes. Again, now that we've elevated our pressure, checking the flare nut connections and all the refrigerant connections a second time for any potential leaks. And finally, the third step of the pressurization test is to pressurize the system to 600 psi, and this time hold that pressurization at 60 minutes. Again, checking all your flare nuts for tightness, using a soap bubble solution looking for any leaks that might occur. Now, this 3-step process is going to ensure that you're able to get a nice, tight, dry system without wasting or overusing your dry nitrogen. Once the system has held pressure for 60 minutes, we will release the dry nitrogen to atmosphere and start the evacuation. It's now time to release the nitrogen and start the evacuation process. According to the quick installation guide, we're going to perform a triple evacuation. The first part of the evacuation, we're going to evacuate the system down to 4,000 microns and let it stand at 4,000 microns for a period of 5 minutes. The second step of the evacuation process, we're going to pull the system down to 200 microns and let it stand for a period of 5 minutes, then break with dry nitrogen. And then finally, for the third step of the triple evacuation process, we're going to evacuate the system down to 500 microns and hold that vacuum for a period of 1 hour. So now that the system's pulled down to 500 microns, and it's stayed at 500 microns for over 60 minutes, we're ready to put the system into operation. The first thing we'll do is, using our Schrader core removal tool, we'll put our Schrader core back in the service valve. Be sure to refer to the data plate on the front of the unit to see if you need to add any additional refrigerant. Additional refrigerant will be added based on linear footage of line set above a certain length. Refer to the chart for the specific model that you're working on and the specific line set length that you have. For this system, no additional charge is needed. Now it's time to grab some metric Allen keys and open up the service valve for refrigerant charge. Now that we've opened the service valves, we're going to put the service valve caps back on and tighten them down. And now we simply need to put the cover back on and start up the system. Now the last step of installation is getting the remote controller started. So simply put the batteries in. We can turn the unit on with the power button. And what you're going to see is oftentimes the display comes set to Celsius. So simply come to the set button and hold it down for 3 to 5 seconds, and that'll change our display to Fahrenheit. Now, according to the steps found in the quick installation guide, we should put the unit through Smart Install, which is going to go and run the system through a system diagnostics check and come back and let us know how the system is operating, and if there's any error codes, report them as well. To initiate Smart Install, simply press the power, the mode, and the set button simultaneously for about 5 seconds. And now you'll notice that our display changed to a 0, and it'll count up to 99, letting us know that the system is going through Smart Install. When the system has completed Smart Install, it'll either go back to its normal display, letting you know it's ready to run, or it will display a fault code, letting you know what to diagnose or what to troubleshoot on the installation.
For service manuals and other documentation, please visit our website at samsunghvac.com or use our Samsung HVAC mobile app to download any technical documentation. Thank you.